Okay. Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Tracy Wheeler. I am the superintendent for Berea City Schools, and thank you for joining us tonight for our community conversation. With us tonight, you're going to see the representatives from the district executive team. We have Mike Draves here, assistant superintendent, Jill Rose, our treasurer, Lori Bobenchek, who's our director of pupil services, Christina Capretta, who's our director of marketing and community relations, Karen Frimmel, who's our director of academic affairs, Vincenzo Ruggiero, who is our director of personnel and employee relations, Mike Slavachka, who's our director of business services, and Vicki Turner, who is our director of technology. So earlier in the year, a couple weeks ago, we shared with you a form asking families to share with us the questions that you might have as we move into the summer of 2020 and as we prepare for the 2021 school year. So thank all of you who actually submitted questions to us. We have captured those questions and we're going to do our best tonight to answer them during the presentation. In addition, there was a Google form that's been shared that you can use during the discussion tonight for any other questions or comments that you might have. During our presentation, we're going to try to keep this as close to an hour as possible. So if we're able to answer any of the questions that you have, we will do it in the presentation. If we run out of time, we will be sure to reach out to you and respond to the questions that you have. So that Google form can be found on the Berea City School District website. So if you pop that up, there's a pop-up notification, and on there is the link to our presentation and link to the form. And then you also should have received an email this morning that has a link to that Google form in that also. So with that, we're going to get started. What I want to do first, the easy part of our presentation tonight, is to give a couple construction updates. So the first one that you're going to see is a video of the new Brook Park Elementary School, and we are nearing completion of that. I think if you were aware, initially the completion of that should have been we should have taken occupancy around March 24th. Obviously, the pandemic put a stop to that. So there have been a few bumps in the road since we left on March 13th. Obviously, with the pandemic, we had a slowdown with construction. However, we do still plan on taking occupancy of the building prior to the start of the 2021 school year. We have our fire inspection that's going to take place around June 15th. Once that's done, we're going to be closer to our occupancy. Furniture will start to be delivered on around June 15th through August 1st. After the furniture is delivered, our architect will be able to sign off on the building, and then we will have staff be able to start to move in. So this just gives you a little bit of what the new elementary looks like. So I think you can tell from the video, it's an incredible building. We're excited to get in there and take occupancy, and the just amazing learning spaces that we're going to have for our younger learners in that building. So we're really excited about that, and as that project is nearing completion. The next thing I want to do is real quick, again, give everyone an update on the construction project at the high school. So we are still on schedule to take occupancy of that building on August 1st. Even with the shutdown, they were able to move forward and still actually be ahead of schedule on several pieces of the building. So we had, prior to the shutdown, been having conversations with Panzica about how far ahead of schedule they were, specifically having conversation about the competition gym, the auxiliary gym, and then the additional PE classrooms that were part of the building. That originally, when construction started, that we were not going to be able to take occupancy of until around December 15th. However, because they are able to give us those areas early on August 1st, just like everything else, we started to have conversations in January, February with our band, choir, and orchestra teachers about the possibility of moving them out of the old high school early and getting them in there and finding some space until the band, choir, and orchestra rooms were done. And they were very willing to do that. So for us to do that, that means that the building we will start the abatement process earlier, and we'll be able to demo the building earlier. So right now, our teachers are pretty much moved out of the building. There is going to be, in our most recent newsletter that went out, there is a final walkthrough of Berea Mid-Park High School. That open house will be this Sunday, June 7th, between noon and 4 o'clock. So we're going to give you a chance just to see what the updates are in the high school right now. Again, a lot of things happening with the high school. Things are moving along very quickly, and we're really excited about the finishing of that building also, and looking forward to taking occupancy on August 1st. So the real reason why everyone's here tonight is to talk about our plans as we move into the summer and as we start to prepare for the 2021 school year. So a couple weeks ago, we sent out a survey to parents asking for your feedback on how we did with remote learning. I want to say, I think when we look back on March 13th, when the order came from the governor to originally close us for 3 weeks, we had no idea. We would have never imagined that we are where we are today, knowing that that our kids weren't going to walk back into our buildings this year. So that was a great endeavor that our teachers took on, preparing for that remote learning in such a short period of time. So this gives you some information about the numbers that we got back. Our pre-K 4 responses, we had 389 parents respond to that, and our students in 5 through 12, 669. We thought it was really important to take that data, separate it out, because we wanted to see what the differences were between our younger learners and our older students. So here's some of the information that we got. So one of the questions on there that we asked parents was, how would you describe the amount of work that had been assigned to your child during remote learning? And I think we're in a good place with parents as far as, were we signing too much work? Were we signing not enough work? Or were we right around the right amount of work? So again, I think that for the most part, we were right where we needed to be. I think a lot of with our pre-K 4 learners, the amount of work also had to do with the amount of help that families had to provide for their students. We know that what we need to do between now and starting next year, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of our thoughts that are going into that we are going to have to create a more robust learning environment, and the amount of work that we do and the amount of actual learning that's taking place needs to be more intense. So the next slide is from the survey. What percentage of time did you or another adult have to help your child with an assignment? And why is this important? Because we need to see, again, our younger learners compared to our older, and none of the data that we have here surprises us at all. We assumed that parents and family members would have to spend more time working with our younger learners, our pre-K 4 kiddos, versus our students that were in grades 5 through 12. Those kids, and again, we have the data that separates out 5 through 8, 9 through 12. Obviously, when kids get 9 through 12, there's less and less amount of time that adults need to help their learners. And one of the things that when we look at this information and the questions that we have as a district that we have to ask ourselves as we start to plan for next year is that, do we need to have our younger learners here in a more brick and mortar environment versus online remote learning for those kids? The next slide is the question that we asked was, if there is no vaccine and there is no change to COVID-19, would you send your child to school for the start of the 2021 school year? This is important to us. 50% of our families won't, or they're unsure of whether or not they're going to send their children back to school in the fall, even if we were back as normal. And so 50% said they will send their children back to school. So one of the things that we've learned in having conversations with ODE is that we know whether our children are here at school in a brick and mortar environment or whether parents choose to keep their children at home, it is still the expectation that we educate all children, whether or not parents choose to send them back to school. That's one of the biggest reasons why you're going to hear as we go through this presentation, why we are putting a lot of emphasis and focus on improving our remote learning process over the summer. And in addition, improving that remote learning environment is an opportunity for us to keep our kids here. Some of the comments that we heard from parents were that if we came back and our remote learning environment wasn't better for kids and for parents, that there's a possibility that those families will leave the district. They can leave the district, and that looks different ways, whether or not parents homeschool their children or whether or not parents actually take their child and enroll them into a true online school. That could have when students start to leave our school, that obviously has a significant funding impact on the district. So this is important information to us. On the next slide, we asked pre-K4 in regard to student support from the teacher on a scale of 1 to 5, my child, they're frustrated, need support, or they felt positive and they were connected to their teacher. This was great information to share, especially with our teachers. Our teachers worked really, really hard over the last couple months, and for them to see, especially in our earlier grades, that they felt very positive that their children were connected to their teachers. I think that was a true testament of all the hard work that our teachers put in trying to stay connected with not only the kids, but with their families also. Now, if you look at that same data in our survey from 5 to 12, I don't think there wasn't much of a surprise here for us. I don't know if it's so much more as that it wasn't positive. We think as we look at this data that this is probably there's just less support because those kids are older, more independent, and or whether or not actually teenagers are communicating with their parents to let them know at what level they are actually getting that support or interaction with their teachers. So the next slide is our most pressing concerns, K4, with implementing any sort of return to school in the fall. Remember, as things have progressed even since we sent this survey out. So I think at the time we sent the survey out, I think we were still completely shut down in Ohio. So we know as days and weeks progress here that the ban on the shutdown and closures has lifted in certain areas. So I think, again, we got to remember when the survey was actually put in place. But one of the things that our parents were most concerned about, if we come back to school, and if we do anything within a remote learning environment, parents were concerned about inconsistency in routines. That was their big concern, K4. And I think a lot of that also has to do, again, if you look at the surveys, of the connection of how much time parents actually have to spend with their children during that remote learning in process and in that environment. So one of the things that we're looking at right now is over the summer, is in order to make that remote learning more manageable for our parents and especially for our younger learners. The next slide, again, for our 5 through 12 kiddos, most pressing concern is the general safety of kids. And again, I don't think it's because the other things aren't important. I just think, again, just the level at which kids are able to do learning and work on their own, some of those things are not as important as they are to our younger kiddos. All right, I'm going to let Mr. Draves talk about these next two pieces of information.
Good evening, everybody. In the survey we sent out, we also put out some potential options of what the fall could look like for school. We started with our elementary parents, our pre-K through 4, and we asked them about different hybrid schooling options to get their input. And this is really a result of what the early draft guidance document that had come out by ODE and the state with regards to one of the largest things to be concerned about for fall schooling was the early guidance is 6 feet of social distance is still going to need to be maintained within the school building. And So that would make it virtually impossible for us to have the numbers of students that we would typically have in a classroom, which could, in an elementary building, range anywhere from 20 to 28 students in one room at a time. We look at a room right now, and probably the most that you could get in there is 10. So we would have to look at different hybrid options. And so we went to great lengths as well within the survey to indicate that these are just some possibilities or potential options, but it's not limited to this. Students attending school every day for half a day, so a morning and an afternoon group. Students would attend school every other day, a blue-orange schedule. Students would attend school for 2 consecutive days. Buildings closed on Wednesday for deep cleaning, and then there would be a Thursday-Friday group, keeping students together in cohorts so that we knew who they were with. Students then, on the last option there, would attend school for a shortened day on a staggered schedule. What you can tell from this data here is that last one, attending on a shortened day, is the one that had the most disapproval. And if we look at the one that's had the best approval rates, it would have been students attending every day for half a day, a morning and an afternoon group. We also then had data with the 5 through 12 group. Secondary education has built in some inherent difficulties, whereas in a high school, 9 through 12, the kids rotate every 50 minutes. One of the other piece of guidance from the state is that between every time a cohort of students leaves, the room must be completely wiped down. In elementary school, that maybe wouldn't be so difficult because kids could tend to stay in the room all day with the same teacher. That's not how it works in the secondary level. And so that piece of guidance also is very problematic for secondary education. So these were the options here, once again, very similar to some of the findings that we had found. The most strongly disapproved would be students would learn remotely, but have the ability to schedule in-person meetings with their teachers in grades 9 through 12. That one had the strongest disapproval. And then the strongest approval rating then would be with students who attend school for 2 consecutive days each. And then it was like Monday, Tuesday, closed on Wednesday for a deep cleaning. And then there would be a Thursday, Friday group.
So where do we go from here? Right now, currently, on Tuesday, if you are following the governor, obviously either in his press conference or in his press conferences or on social media, a tweet that he put out on Tuesday stated that K-12 schools, our goal is to start school in the fall. The date for starting school is solely based in the power of the local school boards, and that will continue to be the case. So what does that mean? The Ohio Department of Education right now is working on what they are calling a restart document. And the information that they have in that document is based on 2 assumptions. One is that the coronavirus will still be with us, that there's no vaccine. And then 2, what are going to be the financial constraints, knowing that whatever it is that's put in place will have financial constraints on districts. There's some principles in there, the need for flexibility, health and safety first for our students, not just our students, but for our staff also. We need to find a way to meet students where they are, look at the gaps, support our educators. They're talking about a website where we can network across the state. Importantly, support the social and emotional and physical health needs of our students. There has to be a strong focus on equity and how they're going to be able to communicate from ODE across the entire state. So the original release of that document was actually supposed to be sometime in May, and then right around the 1st of June. The latest, I was actually on a webinar yesterday, and what they have indicated to us is that at this point now we might, and I say might, get this document in the next 1 to 2 weeks. But they are indicating strong indication that anything that they put out in that document, that we as districts need to expect that there will still be changes in that document between now and the start of school. The release of the document now, if you look on the slide that's up there now, the 4 areas that they really were focusing on were health and safety, the educational considerations, the social emotional health considerations, and the operational considerations. The one piece that they have taken out of ODE's document is the health and safety guidelines. So those are what we are waiting for. We've been working on the academic and the social and emotional pieces of what we know as a district we need to work on over the summer to prepare for the fall. We've been doing that for the last 2-3 weeks. We've already been doing that with our teachers, with our Department of Academic Affairs, and getting those things ready. What we need are the health and safety guidelines. So what they are doing, the latest guidance is that they're taking those health and safety guidelines. Those will come from the Ohio Department of Health, just like the Ohio Department of Health has released any other guidance for any other openings of anything throughout the state. So in this presentation I was in yesterday, again, one of the things that when they did talk about the health and safety guidelines, they're indicating a couple things that Mr. Draves just talked about is that our students and staff are going to have to continue with daily checks of symptoms, including temperature checks, and that ODE believes that the 6 feet of social distancing and the need to limit interactions between students during the day would be a fundamental guideline and consideration. So the one thing that everyone talks about that is a hot topic with a lot of families and people throughout the state is whether or not kids are going to have to wear masks or face coverings. And again, that will be a guidance that we get from the Ohio Department, from the governor's office and from the Ohio Department of Education. Initial guidance that came out said that all students and staff would be required to wear masks. What I'm hearing now is that there's a possibility that may or may not change. So we don't have the answer to that yet. So those guidelines are really, really important for us, the health and safety guidelines before we can move on. Part of the conversation is, why is there such a delay in this? And what we're being told is the delay from the Ohio Department of Health is because Ohio has started to reopen, they're waiting to see how the reopening goes. And so we as a district, we look at that as it's going to go one of two ways, which can help us for us to be able to solidify our plans to move forward for next year. So if there's a spike in confirmed cases and the governor shuts us down again as a state, then I think we're going to be able to anticipate that we won't go back to school in the fall, that we will be learning through remote learning. Or if this goes really well, that they're going to lighten up on the requirements, and we could do some more things than what we had initially thought we might be able to do. So in summary, this document needs more work. There is the draft document out there. From what I've heard, what they're working on now looks very, very different. So you could go to, I think it was released, if you just Google it, the ODE's Reset Restart document draft, you can see it, you can look at what's in there. But from what I understand, that we haven't seen anything since the initial release of that draft. So you can see at least what was in there to begin with. So what everyone needs to hear tonight is everyone wants to be back at school. But in order to do that, we have to do that in a way that we maintain the health and safety of our students and staff. Another recommendation that ODE has made is that we need to move forward as school districts and plan for the most stringent of scenarios. And what they were focusing on was whether it's fully remote or whether we're in a blended environment. And they're getting the sense that they do not feel that we'll be able to be back full in person for all students in the start of the fall. And again, this information that we get is changing on a daily and a weekly basis. So starting as we have already started conversations. So obviously reaching out to parents and getting feedback and input from parents. We've done several meetings with our staff. A week ago, we did a meeting with our elementary, our middle school, our high school staffs, had conversations with them, and then followed up with a survey to get their input on how things are going, what PD do they need to move forward, what ideas, comments, suggestions do they have. But as we start to move forward, this is our goal as a district. We need to provide the best possible education during this global pandemic for all of our students pre-K-12 without sacrificing the health and safety of our students and our staff. That's what we're operating under. So I'm going to let Mr. Dace talk a little bit about our operating assumptions that fall underneath that goal.
Thanks, Tracy. Tracy asked us to get together with a group of teachers and administrators and begin to develop Berea City School District's operating assumptions, knowing that we don't know what the guidance will be from the state or the impact of the virus will be when we get to August. So what our mantra has been is we are going to hope for the best, but we will prepare for the worst over this summer. So we will take the next 2 to 3 months to make sure that we're ready for a variety of options for families and for staff. So we could be back in school in the fall, and then a spike hits, as Tracy had indicated, and so then we might get called to go back to remote. And so our goal here is to be able to move between plans as seamlessly as possible. Our operating assumptions, Berea City School District is going to hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We're coming from the belief that by the start of school, there will not be a vaccine. The district has made a movement in the last month to assure that every student in grades K through 12 will have their own Chromebook. Every student will have their own Chromebook, not one per family, but one per student in K through 12. We must be flexible and nimble and be able to adjust the changing guidance. Literally, we are getting updates daily from the Ohio Department of Health, the Ohio Department of Education, and the governor's office, which then have implications for our planning and for what school could look like. We know that we must consider the flexibility within this plan for families and staff that have different levels of comfortability in sending their children to school, and staff whose availability may be in question as a result of their health or their family circumstances. So we're trying to develop a plan that has some built-in flexibility for everybody. As we go, one of the things that Tracy mentioned is that we do need to have a more robust remote environment. We know it'll look different. In order to be fair, realize that March 13th, we got our order shut down for 3 weeks, then we got extended, and then we got extended again. So there was really kind of 3 different levels of where we were. We know we need to do some work with remote learning, and that's how we're going to spend some of our summer. Teacher professional development will be essential during the summer of 2020 to best prepare our educators to teach in this unique, variable, and changing environment. And so we're going to put that work in, and we've already begun that. We spent the month of May reflecting on what we had done and what was good and what we needed to change, and we're working on putting those plans in place, putting the appropriate professional development in place for our teaching staff. We know, if at all feasible, that the Berea City School District must make every effort to provide face-to-face learning, starting with our earliest learners on up. As the survey that Mrs. Wheeler went over illustrated to you, starting with the elementary learners is a priority because of the learner skill development and their ability to be able to work independently, their maturity level. So that's where we start. But it must be emphasized that we believe the best environment for all students is at school. But going back to our goal, we know we can't just bring everyone back with sacrificing health and safety of our staff and students. So we have to work within the parameters that we've been given. We also believe for our most vulnerable and at-risk student population, those students who we know struggle even in our brick and mortar settings, it's essential that we get them back because they struggle even more. Returning them to school if possible is essential for them to be able to grow. We know we've heard from our teachers from the last 3 months, numerous examples of kids. The playing field is not level for kids, and so we need to get some groups back is essential for them. The red, orange, yellow, and green plans are really just kind of to give you an idea of what it could possibly look like, where our red plan would be an all remote stay home, obviously under the direction of the governor and the Ohio Department of Health. Orange could be a 50-50 alternating days where half the group goes on Monday, the other half on Tuesday, etc. Yellow could be a hybrid plan, and we need to hash that out. If you go back to the opinions on potential options, that would give you an idea of what some of the hybrid plans are out there that school districts are looking at. Nothing is really off the table with regards to that. Our goal is to provide the best possible education for all students. And so if that's where we end up, that's where we end up with the guidance that we have. And then green could be students at school, and then we just make sure that we're on top of it and we increase our mitigation activities. So there were some questions that were put in here from the community with regards to classwork and remote learning that I'd like to have the opportunity to address. The first one, can you provide an update on how remote learning went from both a staff and student perspective? I would say we certainly learned a lot. I think it's important to remember, as I had mentioned, that the guidance we got from the state changed. It was first for 3 weeks, then it was a couple more, and then it was for the rest of the year. I will say I was really impressed with our teachers who worked to improve their practice and improve their skills using digital tools and how to teach remotely. We know we were way better when we ended in May than when we started on March 13th. And we have spent, as I had said, the month of May reflecting, and we're going to be able to make course corrections this summer and hopefully be able to provide the best possible remote environment if that's what we have to do. So will the curriculum shift for next year? Will there be a review period? As I had said, we had spent the month of May reflecting and planning for moving forward. And it's included a survey out to our community, conversations with all levels of our teachers about what work needs to be done and what needs to be tweaked. In our challenges, we find opportunities. And so this summer, we're going to create common assessments per grade level and per subject, which will then go directly to address our curriculum consistency, to address this question. Distance learning proved to be a failure for my child is this question. What will make it any different going into next year? So we're going to look at it differently. We're going to spend a good portion of the summer creating our blended plans to make it more robust and rigorous for kids. And we'll be looking to moving from focusing on feedback solely and completion to grading, and making sure that students are meeting the standard. When we began, a major concern of Mrs. Wheeler's and ours was equity and access. We think we have a better handle on this. And as we move into the next phase, we know that we're going to try and make this learning more robust. Once again, continuing conversations with your school and with your child's teachers is also essential to try and make sure that your child isn't failing. How will students recover lost ground in any subject such as chemistry and other lab-based learning? And really, this is a concern with all subjects. You know, for 3 months, we missed in essence the last quarter of school. And so you just are going to miss some stuff. And so what we have done this last week with teachers is we did a gap analysis, which means that basically we asked teachers to look at what would they typically have learned, what would students typically have learned during this last 9 weeks. What did we learn and what was missed, so that we can push that information up to their teachers for next year and be able to include that. We're going to take a look at our curriculum maps for next school year and make sure that we're including those things, let's say for 4th grade, that were missed at the end of 3rd grade. That is a really good question and something that's essential for us to make sure that we cover that lost ground that was missed. The number 5 there, will you continue to use this modified grading system for students? As I said, the grading system is going to look different. We focused on feedback and completion. We would see, as I said, moving more toward grading and meeting the standard. And once again, emphasizing that when we began this, there was real concerns about equity and access. What we mean by that is that some families in our districts, there's varying levels of technology in homes and access to internet. And we didn't want those children to fall significantly behind. I think we have a really good handle through our community survey on where we're at with that. And we're taking strides to make sure that we're addressing that by giving every child a Chromebook in K through 12, and also addressing internet capabilities, or at least trying to be able to help families as much as we can. Number 6, can teachers, even non-core teachers, have all weekly assignments up for kids by 8 a.m. on Monday? It's it's a really good suggestion. We know different families work differently, and so this is one of the things that we had heard that some families work, we want to see it all on one day. Other families would love to see it chunked and broken up. We are going to work to have a lot more uniformity in our expectations for students and for teachers, and specifically with regards to posting assignments, so that parents who I know at the lowest levels are really, or the earliest learner levels, are really working hand in hand right next to their kids. And so access to where the assignments are posted, being able to plan accordingly for what's coming is really, really important to parents who are also still trying to, work from home or still work and then come back home and then help their children with schooling. So that's, we certainly have heard that from numerous places. Number 7, how will I know my child is being put in the correct class next year? The schoolwork we have has been very well planned, but in this person's opinion, essentially busy work and nothing new. First thing we would emphasize is if you have concerns about something specific, always contact your building administrator with regard to your child specifically. Have those conversations. They're there. The administrators are in school for the next 3 weeks. As I'd mentioned, we have a detailed vertical articulation between teachers, between first and second and third, et cetera. Not only about curriculum, but also about individual students, especially at the younger grade levels, where our first grade teachers have talked with our second grade teachers about the kiddos that are coming up and what supports they may need. So teachers are talking and making sure that the next teacher is aware of those gaps and can plan accordingly over the summer. I also think it's important to make sure that you reach out to the teacher next year and express concerns if you have them, and be able to specify what your child's needs as you know your child best. Grades can be updated weekly or even bi-weekly. Can grades be updated bi-weekly for weekly or bi-weekly for all classes? And I'd say feedback to parents on grades is really, really important. I learned this myself with my own daughter, that you want to be able to see what assignments they have put in, so that you can stay on top of that and they don't fall behind, and that they're doing the work that they're supposed to. So I think once again, we would obviously set more consistency with regards to when teachers are posting, so that parents know when things are going to be in there, and that they can then hold their students accountable if in fact we are remote again. Number 9 has how has the distribution of Chromebooks to families affected the district? I think it's been a big plus that we've, number 1, had so many Chromebooks to be able to, first a huge shout out to Vicki Turner, who is our director of technology, and her staff, who worked tirelessly in March and April to make sure as many learners as possible could get those Chromebooks. It went really, really well. And we're extending that so that every student, K through 12, will have a Chromebook in the fall. And so that was, I think, a really important point. And it spoke to the equity and access issues that we were really, really concerned about when we started this on March 13th, that we couldn't just change because obviously we didn't know this was coming. And number 10, if distance learning continues in any capacity moving forward, can teachers be mandated to provide identical equivalent printed work for students who cannot access and manage online content independently while their parents are at work? One of the things that we've learned is that manipulatives and access are important. And so we're certainly going to look at that. We're going to meet with all of our grade level teachers, specifically the younger teachers, the teachers in the younger grade levels, to talk to them about what they saw with regards to that. We're not going to put the genie back in the bottle and not have our tech out there, as we believe that it helps leverage some really important initiatives for the school district. But we have heard that. We want to make sure that if there's any special concerns specifically with your child, that you once again address that with the building administrator or the teacher. And we're always glad to help and make those kinds of accommodations when it's necessary. Okay, I think that's it for me.
Good evening, everyone. The first question there regarding extended care program, will we be applying for the pandemic child care license if we are fully remote in the fall? First, our extended care program is licensed under the Ohio Department of Education. So it's a little different of a entity of how we get that licensing. And the pandemic license fell under the Ohio Department for Jobs and Family Services. So there's a little difference there. So actually right now, as we're looking at the fall and all the potential options of what could happen, we, from the extended care perspective, we're looking at that Responsible Restart Ohio guidance for childcare, and that's the information that we're using and what is mandatory requirements there to provide for the safety and for our staff and for our students. Looking at that, we are looking at, what supplies will we need additionally beyond what we are doing already to keep a safe environment for our kids. It also addresses the staffing and student ratios, which is much smaller than what they're operating in under right now. Physical space is also a piece. So we're looking at all those mandatory requirements as guidance. And as we know that could change as we go further, but using that right now, we're looking at that, doing a cost analysis to see, what additional expenses will we have, and doing a cost analysis to see how we can go ahead and implement that restart guidance for our extended care program, but still remain solvent in that program. So just like Mr. Draves was speaking about all the different the scenarios, we're considering those when we're looking at extended care as well, because I can assure you that in every conversation that we're having in the district regarding what fall will look like for all of our kids, there's always a conversation about what impact this is going to have for our families. And we know that regardless of whether you are, there's multiple people working in your family or not, in all the different scenarios that we have going on in our homes, that is a significant piece and it will have an impact on everyone. And so we are really being cognizant of that as we're looking to implement the best we can for extended care program options. That decision and what that will look like will follow, again, the guidance that we have from the state and as that evolves, but also as it will come after we know what school is going to look like. So just be patient as we have those decisions. We will have the extended care information follow. The next question really regarding the gaps, I think Mr. Draves really addressed that in the conversations that were going on in our buildings over the past few weeks.
Okay, this is Mike Slovachka, Director of Business Services, and I'll highlight and answer some of these questions under health and safety, and some of these questions were touched upon earlier. But the first one deals with the question about how will busing work. So the impact of busing, or what impacts busing, are really two things. First would be the social distancing aspect. There's not definitive guidelines regarding specific numbers, but given the typical size of our bus, we would be looking at roughly 24 students would be a max on that, which is really at half capacity. And so the implication with that deals with the routing of your buses. So if you just think in simplistic terms, that is half the number of students, you would theoretically would need twice the number of buses or bus routes to try and transport all of our students. The second part of that, the aspect of social distancing, it goes back to some of the items that Mr. Draves was speaking about, of potential options for the students and what that looks like on their daily schedule. So as more answers come or more guidelines come in regards to what those things, then the busing will have to be adjusted accordingly. The second question, tentative ideas that keep students and staff safe. The starting point, there's been guidelines for various sectors, but the bottom line is if you think of general areas, first talking about appropriate face coverings for all of our employees and our visitors currently. As of right now, the current guidance would be masks for students, but as a later question, and I think Mrs. Wheeler spoke to this, that is up for further discussion and subject to change as we get further guidance from the Ohio Department of Health. Conducting daily health assessments for our employees, really the self-evaluation, and same things with students. We will continue to advance that potentially with equipment. We'll take a look at what further guidance also in that area. I think good hygiene, regardless of our current situation, but those practices, not only of reinforcing good practices for our employees and any of our visitors, but also having the appropriate sanitation stations and devices and disinfectants. We've already started to secure those items prior to us shutting down in the early part of March, and we continued to secure those items, clean and sanitizing, any of our physical facilities, but including our buses. It's really dealing with the frequency and having more supplies to do that on a very frequent basis. And then the second thing, or the last thing, what goes back to the whole social distancing aspect. We would take a look at what other further guidelines come down, and then there's a lot of factors. I mean, when you get into a classroom and the implication of, I think Mr. Graves touched upon it, you're dealing with a typical size for our classrooms. You're talking about 9 to 10 students. Other things in social distancing, dealing with traffic patterns within the school building and the hallways have to be taken into consideration. Any type of common areas, all those logistical things come into play. As we get further guidance, then we'll have to make those type of adjustments. I already answered, or the questions about students wearing masks has already been addressed for right now. Sick policies and guidelines, we would adhere. We go to currently, if we have anyone that is currently exhibiting symptoms and so forth, as an employee, then, they obviously be, sent home and would be there until further cleared and would have to take appropriate leave. The flexibility, going with, question 3 up here talked about if a student started school for 2 days a week and somebody did not feel safe, very similar to their own attendance procedures, whatever would be in place for the school. It also depends, what type of, we have to continue to remain flexible in how we provide, our academic services and so forth and options and continue to evolve with that. Question 6 about what supplies should families start to put back to help. It sounds like a very simple answer that yes, try to secure hand sanitizers and wipes, but those are things that are very difficult to come by in the store. So the school district we have began, as I mentioned earlier, back in the early part of March, of having hand sanitizer stations located in each of our classrooms, in addition to additional hand sanitizer. That challenge for people to secure wipes for all of our students, that would be ideal. That would be part of their class supply list, but that could also be difficult for our parents to secure just due to the availability. So we are also exploring to get sanitizing wipe stations in our classroom, and that also has to be evaluated with the overall cost. The safety precautions, I hit upon those in a couple of different areas, but the bottom line is in regards to securing additional supplies and cleaning supplies, masks and gloves. We've already been in that process. And the same thing goes with the equipment, not only in the classroom, but we have looked to secure additional sanitizing equipment to help make things more efficient and to address the frequency aspect of things in cleaning and sanitizing our overall facilities. So I believe I answered those type of questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. I want to actually just say a couple things. The one question on there about sick policies and if they'll be strictly enforced. When that draft document came out from ODE on their reset restart guidelines, one of the health and safety guidelines in there, they talked specifically about a sick child at school and what that would look like. And one of the things that they had put in there, again, that was with the draft, whether or not that will still be part of ODH's guidance when they put out their document, was that we would be required to have 2 separate clinics in our schools that, for kids who are just coming in and getting meds or not feeling well versus kids who might be having symptoms related to the coronavirus would have to go into another clinic that you separate those kids. So those are the kinds of things that we're still waiting on that guidance about how we address, sick children that our school nurses are working with on a daily basis. So a couple of questions before I get to this next slide that were out there. Somebody asked in one of our questions if we would be resurveying our families. And actually, we just had the conversation about this today. We will, again, because when we sent that survey, it was early. Hopefully we'll have a little more guidance, know what's going on from the Ohio Department of Health. We will be sending another survey out to our families in July sometime. So we're not sure if that'll be the 1st of July or if we'll push that to the mid of July. Again, I think we want to have our information as current as possible. So we'll try to push that as far as we can. Another question someone asked in on our form was whether or not volunteers would be allowed in the buildings next year. And that's some actual guidance that we've received also, is that, and we did that at the end of the year this year, but that we would be limiting visitors to our school. Again, they want mitigation, limit the interactions with kids and as any extra people. So we would be limiting the number of visitors that we have into our school buildings next year, at least to start the year is what it looks like. So these next 3 slides I'm going to present, I've tried to cluster them together. And the first one kind of talks about plans. And I think you've heard us talk a lot about plans. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these questions specifically, but I'll try to address it as I can. So all planning discussions that we've had so far, again, go back to the goal that we have and the assumptions that we've created as a district. So we've begun to do that work with leadership, not just administrative leadership, but teacher leadership also, to talk about all the different types of options that we have available to us. So we said our goal, if we had it our way, we would have all kids back in school full time if possible. Everything we are hearing is that would not be possible right now at this point. And again, as we start to look at either that remote option or a hybrid option, again, that's when we're going to be working with our community and our staff to develop the specifics of those plans and what it'll look like. So soon, I'm probably going to say closer to the end of June. Again, waiting on guidance. You can hear that word, guidance. We're going to create a team who's going to help us assist to look more closely with the options and help us problem solve any of those options that we have on the table. So we're looking at a team that would be consisted of parents, some students, community leaders, our teachers, our support staff, and our administrators. And we're hoping, again, when we get that reset, restart document in the next couple of weeks, that we'll be able to start to look at reaching out and getting that team together. To create that plan this early, we believe, and I know everybody's eager. Families are eager, kids are eager, our teachers are eager. Everybody wants to know what's the plan. And, I think everybody was on a call with superintendents today, and we all believe it's too early. It makes no sense for us to put out an actual plan right now because everything is so fluid with regard especially to the health and safety guidelines that we don't even have yet. So when we're closer to knowing what those guidelines are going to look like, we will definitely start assembling that team and working on the specifics of what our plan will look like. So I think once we get that team together, I will say this, and I say this with caution, and I'm going to use the word earliest. The earliest that I think that our families and our students and our staff, and we shared this information with our staff yesterday in the same manner in which we're sharing it with you today, the earliest that we might even be releasing our plan for next year would be in the middle of July. And I say that with extreme hesitation and caution, saying that the earliest would be the middle of July. So I think we said that the opening of Ohio can help us or hurt us. Well, it's going to help us. It's going to give us direction, whether or not the reopening goes really well or if we get a flare up in cases. One of the questions I do want to answer, though, on there is are folks asking about, and I've had several people reach out to me and email me about this, about whether or not we're going to be able to keep siblings together. And I think if that question wasn't real specific, but I think if we're talking about, you have a first grader and a third grader, and we came back on a blue-orange schedule or half-day schedule or whatever that might be, I would say, yeah, we're going to try everything we can to make sure that those siblings stay together. But if we start talking about siblings from different building levels, that you've got a middle schooler and you've got an elementary kiddo, I don't know what that's going to look like. Again, we understand the constraints that are going to be put on parents if we do any kind of a hybrid blue, orange, whatever schedule. So we will do our best to try to accommodate families as much as we can within reason. Again, people asked about class size, and I can't remember which Mike answered that class size, that we look, if the 6 feet of social distancing is still a requirement as we start school, that we look anywhere between 9 to 10 kids in a classroom at a time. And remember, right now, only gatherings of no more than 10 people. So we would say that has to be 9 kids plus a teacher. There's your 10 people in a classroom. So the next slide just talks about more of the parent, and then a piece of students getting ready for the fall and transitions. And this has been a big one. So first talking about kindergarten, the information session. So we did, those sessions were originally scheduled for April and May, and we did those and we put those online. So if you haven't seen those yet, or you're just now starting to register your kindergartner, make sure you go to our district webpage, and there is our Department of Academic Affairs, Mr. Pellegrino, our kindergarten teachers created a kindergarten page that is really, it's amazing. The page has got resources, there's printables, there's videos, there's all kinds of things that you can start to do to get your kindergartner ready for school in the fall. So if you haven't visited that page yet, please go to our website and check that page out. The questions about orientations, so this is similar. We kind of view this similar to what we did with commencement. So our commencement plan, we weren't just able to decide this is what we're going to do for commencement. We're going to put it in place and hope all goes well. We were required to run our plan through the Ohio Department of Health. Any plans for commencement had to be run through our local Board of Health. So we did reach out to the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, ran that plan past them. So 2 things. Again, I think we have to prepare. One, yes, we want, whether it's our 4th graders going to 5th grade, 8th graders going to the high school, whatever the case may be, we want to be able, if we can, and if plans would be approved, to get those kids into the buildings to do some sort of orientation or at least walkthroughs. We know that those transitions are stressful. They're stressful for kids and they're also stressful for parents. So we're gonna try to do that. Mrs. Capretta is already working, as we talked today. She's starting in the middle school next week and starting even to videotape like hallways. This is a 5th grade hallway, because we're also going to have to be able to accommodate for those students and or parents who may not actually be able to physically come in the building due to a health impairment. You can't fit a time in, whatever the case may be. So we will try our best to accommodate that. But we do believe that we will be able to get our kids in the building if the Department of Health actually approves that for us. So the next slide then, I kind of took different things about sports, homecoming football, band and choir, and kind of combined all of those together. So currently, we received guidance about a week and a half ago from OHSAA, allowing our student athletes to begin to engage in skills training and conditioning. I was on a webinar, I think it was yesterday, and one of the things that doesn't account for is band. So there's no guidance on band, and the attorney that was speaking at our webinars, said they know it. the Ohio Department of Health understands that there are issues and concerns that need to be addressed around band and choir with regard to respiratory projectiles and how that could put our students and staff at risk. So we want to they're working on those guidelines right now. Again, we're on hold for that. I know if they're asking about, band camp or anything like that, we can't give an answer to that yet because we do not have any guidance from the Ohio Department of Health. With regards to what sports is going to look like, again, we're in a holding pattern. That guidance will come directly from the Ohio High School Athletic Association. So they have followed suit. So OHSAA is not going to release any kind of plan for the return of football, cross country, girls volleyball, or anything like that in the fall until those health and safety guidelines have been issued from the Ohio Department of Health, and probably until our academic guidelines have been released too from the Ohio Department of Education. The last question on there, how do you envision teachers and families working together going forward? So again, I think Mike said it. I think we've all said it. We have to applaud our staff for the work that they did over the last several months of school. And I can't tell you the number of either phone calls, in-person conversations, or emails that I've got from staff who were heartbroken about not being able to be in school with their kids, who were genuinely concerned about the well-being of their students. Again, I think what we talked about when we left March 13th, we could not have envisioned what school was going to be like for the rest of the year. So when that happened, our staff answered the call, and they created that remote learning environment in 9 days. Their academics were important, and this was a message I sent to the staff. When people talk about, oh, my kids, they really didn't learn anything new. And again, equity and access to me were very, very important, but also taking care of our kids. At that time, we knew families were losing their jobs. And again, our kids had been thrust into a situation that no one was prepared for. So our teachers did a really great job of reaching out to kids and reaching out to parents. And again, I think the one thing that we learned from the survey is that, again, working together. So I wasn't really sure how to interpret this question, but working together is that we are working currently on a learning management system that we might use for next year in ways to create some consistency across whether you've got a first grader, an eighth grader, or a 12th grader, and what that might look like so that it makes it easier on kids, it makes it easier on parents, and it makes it easier on the teachers to help communicate and help to work better. We also think with having every student on a Chromebook and not all kinds of different devices, that will also, we learned from our teachers. Our teachers spent a lot of time not just helping kids navigate remote learning, they also spent a lot of time helping parents navigate remote learning. So we hope if we create a consistent learning environment, that does help everyone as they're working together if we have to be in a remote learning environment. So I'm going to turn over to Mrs. Rowe and talk a little bit about finances.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Rowe. I'm the treasurer at Berea Schools. Basically, I'm just going to answer some of the questions. It's been all over the newspapers recently about the recent budget cuts the governor made to the schools. The cuts to Berea City Schools equated to $1.3 million. And those cuts are happening now. They're taking our money with the payments in May and the payments in June. So $1.3 million is coming out of our revenue in May and June of this year. Moving forward, I think we've talked about, the restart plan for Ohio. If it goes well and the economy gets back moving, I do not think those cuts are going to be nearly as bad next year, beginning July 1st. But if it doesn't go well and the economy doesn't get started again and sales tax doesn't come in, and I think we're going to see future cuts. Figured into the 5-year forecast, though, the $1.3 million came out this year, and then I took another $1.3 million out next year. Again, we don't know what it's going to look like at this point, depending on how the opening of Ohio goes. That $1.3 million could be too low. I mean, if it doesn't go well, we could see bigger cuts coming. Overall, the 5-year forecast is faring pretty well through this. Through year 5, we do have a cash balance. However, we are deficit spending. We are spending more than we are bringing in. And we need to begin to look at that. And I've said that for the past couple years, we need to begin looking at that. These cuts, they came very quickly, very unexpectedly. But for now, we're weathering this storm. Will there be a levy on the ballot next year? That's the next question. Again, I know we've said we have to wait. At this current time, no. We just need to wait and see what the future cuts are going to be. Again, we haven't been told by the governor's office what that's going to look like for July 1. We again know through June 30th that $1.3 million is going back to the state. But until we see those future cuts, we can't make a good decision on determine if a levy needs to be put on the ballot or not. How will the restart guidance affect the district's budgets? We've talked a lot about the restart guidance, and Mr. Slovachka talked about it. The items that are going to need to be purchased potentially. We're waiting to see. It's going to affect district budgets, definitely. If we have to purchase wipes for a classroom, sanitizer, all those little things, they add up very quickly. So we are looking at that, and we are going to either, we might have to ask the buildings to pool their funds together so we can get these items. And then the last question, permanent improvement projects. We are still continuing with some small permanent improvement projects, but, after the shutdown happened and after the third shutdown continued to happen, we decided to put most of our permanent improvements, our large ones, on hold till we see what this is actually going to look like. Again, if we need money to buy all this PPE and all the stuff, we might have to tap in also to our permanent improvement fund to buy some of these things, some of these larger things, partitions, things that might have to go into the classrooms. So again, we are faring fairly well with these cuts, but they did affect us. And I think every school district across the state felt these. So we will continue to monitor these cuts moving forward and try to provide the most accurate information we can regarding the district finances.
Okay. My name is Lori Babinchak, the Director of Pupil Services, and registration and enrollment for the district falls under our department here in Pupil Services. So this is a friendly reminder that registration is underway. So that applies specifically, obviously, kindergarten. That's the largest number of enrollments that we have around this time of the year. So we want to really encourage you, if you have a child at home that will turn 5 by the end of July, we want you to register. You can do it tonight when we're done here. Please, the sooner the better, because that helps us to be better prepared for your kids when they walk into our doors or when we prepare for their learning environment for the fall. So again, if you have a child, if you have neighbors, grandchildren, please encourage them. We specifically are emphasizing kindergarten, but that goes for any other. If families are changing what they're doing and they decide to change their enrollment into a public school system for whatever reason, please encourage them. So any grade level from kindergarten, actually preschool through 12th grade, please encourage them to register as the sooner the better. There are 2 steps to our registration process. You can go online on our website and start the online application. So that can be done from home. It doesn't require you to come into the building at this point in time. That's step 1. You will get email communication regarding your application throughout the process of that. And then our intent is that in late July or in August, that we will complete step 2, which will involve one family member coming in and completing that process with a couple of face-to-face interactions with documents. We are preparing to make sure we're providing all the safety guidelines to ensure that environment's safe for our families coming in as well as our staff that are processing that. So again, please register as soon as possible so that we can be prepared for your kids to come in. I'm trying to go through some of the questions that have been submitted, and I saw there was a couple, I think, regarding preschool. And if you have a preschooler, preschool conversations are right in there. When we're talking about K-12 and what our learning environment will look like for the fall, we're also talking about our preschoolers. We know that we have preschoolers that have an IEP. And so they have some special learning needs that we need to be prepared for and provide that education as well. We are looking at that. We know that that's going to be different when we talk about a 3-4-year-old versus a 16-year-old, and what that learning, how we provide that education may look different. So those are being considered. We're talking about, do they need manipulatives? How do we get that to parents so that we can support that learning in a way so your child can continue to progress. So again, as we follow the guidelines for all of our grade levels and define what the fall learning is going to look like, preschool will be involved in that conversation and that communication as well. Going back, and so this is kind of a repeat regarding extended care. I can't emphasize to you guys enough. We know it always how much our society is built around children from the time they're 5 years old, and some younger when preschool through high school are going to school every day. That's what our society is built on. That's what we kind of form our family lives around regarding work and so on. So we know the significance of that, and we are truly taking that into consideration. Many of us on the team and our staff members from across the board, from bus drivers to teachers, administrators, are parents ourselves. So we know that, and we're considering that as we are preparing. Again, I'm not trying to be vague with the information, but we have to make sure that we are following the guidelines that we're given, and we're considering how that's going to impact families and how we can provide that for our kids and our families to do the best we can to support you guys during this unusual time.
All right, I'm going to talk real quick about, I think Laura, you're on here, but I'll go ahead and talk about this real quick. So we have, obviously, since the stay-at-home order was put in place, the school district has been providing breakfast and lunch 2 days a week for all 5 days, but 2 pickup days a week since we had the shutdown. And that was available to anyone who lived in the district from age 1 to 18. And we've been, up to this point, we were right around about 450 meals a day, so 900 if you consider breakfast and lunch. So one of the things that we've been, we usually are not a district who does summer feeding, which we would provide breakfast and lunch in the summer. However, there is some federal money out there that has allowed us to go ahead. We believe it is incredibly important for us to still maintain that. And we made a commitment that we will still do that throughout the summer. So if you know anyone, or if you're in need, it doesn't even have to be in need. If you want the summer grab and go meals, we've changed what we're doing, and we'll be pushing this information out. I think we've already started to push it out, but our pickup days will only be on Wednesdays from 11 to 12. On that day, for every child you're picking up for, there will be 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches that will be distributed at that time. And then we've changed pickup locations. So we're still doing them at the Berea Mid-Park Middle School. We'll be at Big Creek. We'll be at Grindstone, and instead of being at Brookview and BPM, we're going to stay at we're going to try to get them at the new Brook Park Elementary building, but we want to put them at BPM right now until we know that we're going to be able to have access to the parking lot at the new Brook Park Elementary School. So that will be the change. So please, if you know of anyone, or if you're interested in that, that is something that we will continue to do over the summer. We've made a commitment to do that from the district. So just the last thing, again, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I know we've got about 150 people-ish on, I think. So thank you for coming on and being a part of this really important conversation with us. So as we navigate this process and we're making our plans for the 2021 school year, we will continue to reach out and communicate to our students and our families and our staff about what those plans are and what help we need to put things in place. So be sure to stay connected. If you're not connected to us, obviously we push emails out, we do phone calls, but we also put a lot out on our social media sites. So there's some connections there to our social media sites. So lastly, what I want to say before we end tonight is I want to thank all of you. So parents who are listening tonight, or our community members, for all that you're doing at home to support your children. That we know it's not easy to take on this new role for your child while maintaining your homes, your own families, your jobs. and yourself. And then we also want to thank our teachers for doing the same kind of thing. We as a district, this isn't what we're not here for this. This is not what we do. We are here about kids, connecting with our adults, and connecting with our families. So this isn't the environment that we want to be in. So we really, truly have missed seeing all of our students, and that we hope in some capacity that we can be back next year with everyone in the fall. So, and until then, if there's anything that we can do for you or your family, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are truly here for you. So everybody have a great